Will Silverstein with News 3 LV. We have been speaking with people about these expiring ACA subsidies, and we are going in depth today with Representative Susie Lee, who gives us her take on what the holdup is, what negotiations should look like, and we're also going to the other side of the aisle as well with Republican political consultant Matt Klink, who gives his 2 cents on what could happen next with these ongoing negotiations. Let's watch. All right, pleased to be joined here by Congresswoman Susie Lee. We talked last month about this. We know that there's a vote that's expected to come up. There's a vote that seems to be promised on this. Has there been any progress made, in your opinion, in the last month in these negotiations?
Well, listen, a lot of the negotiations are being held pretty close to the vest. And so I know people are working on it diligently. I'm part of a working group working on it. So there's certainly plenty of conversations happening and plenty of negotiations happening around Capitol Hill on this issue. Obviously, we have a cliff coming up at the end of the year where people are going to see their insurance premiums double, triple, even quadruple in some cases. So, and by the way, the Senate passed or came to an agreement where they would take a vote on this before the end of next week. So I think people are working. Time is not our friend right now, but I think people are working very hard on it.
And then as far as I know that there's been the questions about, okay, what's the negotiating points? I know in the past have been against anything that would threaten things like access to abortion or other women's health care issues. Is that still where you stand today?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, that's a deal breaker for me, obviously, and it's something that the Susan B. Anthony Association sent a letter to Republican members, basically saying that if there was an extension without taking those protections away, they would score it against those members. They're going to have to handle their own politics around that. But obviously, I think our best path forward is keep it simple. The more you start adding on, the more tweaks you start making, definitely the negotiations get exponentially more difficult. So I think our best path forward at this point is to try to keep it as simple as possible. Give us a time frame. There's obviously negotiations around income limits, around having people have like a minimum pay in, all of that stuff. I think that we should give ourselves a year or two to work some of those details out. But most importantly, we're coming up to a cliff where many Americans, 80,000 Nevadans, 30,000 of my constituents are going to find that healthcare is unaffordable. That means that they're going to make the risky choice to go without it. And that's what we're up against. And not only that, it's going to mean that everyone's health insurance is going to increase as well. So I think that between now and the end of the month, we got our work cut out for us. Let's keep it simple. Let's give ourselves some time to negotiate on the trickier things. But in the meantime, let's do what we can to save healthcare and make it affordable for Americans, as it has been.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you taking a few minutes here as you're in session right now as well. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Have a good one.
One of the biggest points I know, Matt, that you've made in our previous conversations about this is that Republicans don't really like voting for Obamacare subsidies. That's kind of been a thing in the past. There's not a long record of doing so. Maybe it looks a little bit differently when it's an ACA subsidy, if that's the framing, when it's a temporary extension. Does this sort of change? Has there been any change, I guess, in the last month since we last talked about this? That it seems like more Republicans are willing to try and do something to extend some sort of subsidy boost or benefit?
I think that the Republicans are giving it, as we say, the old college try to figure out a way to provide these subsidies to people that really need them. Although I have to tell you, Will, look, the Democrats sold these quote unquote enhanced subsidies as temporary COVID emergency relief, and they subsequently have continued to extend them. So letting these temporary expansions expire or radically revising them, perhaps pegging them to income, is about honesty, fiscal sanity and frankly reform that, well, look, we can't have these endless quote unquote temporary fixes that never end. This is proof that Obamacare is not working. It hasn't lowered costs. In fact, all it is it's a massive wealth transfer from the consumer to insurance companies. And it's just, unfortunately, it's not working. And the Democrats know it, but they're so wed to this that they can't bear to admit failure.
It does seem like there is a fair amount of sympathy from Republicans to try and extend something to try and keep some costs down. I know that Josh Hawley wants to do it. We're hearing today like Zach Nunn from Iowa is looking to jump on as well. I think the big question though is, as we're seeing something from Bill Cassidy, that maybe some sort of like a health savings account type of alternative, something like that. Would that end up being what's more likely? Something that doesn't exactly look like this extension, maybe some other form, than to just once again, I guess, extend.
Yeah, look, the biggest challenge that Republicans face here is that the Democrats designed Obamacare with no Republican votes. They passed the subsidies with no Republican votes. They did it knowing that Obamacare was not going to work in the long run. What they want is government funded health care or a government takeover of healthcare. So any Republican plan or modification that gives money directly to the healthcare consumer, that's going to be a non-starter as far as the Democrats are concerned. So it almost like you have two immovable forces with two radically different agendas. One is the Republicans, let's lower cost for the consumer. And the Democrats, let's fund big government and hope that it drives down costs. Now, it hasn't worked anywhere else, but, again, what do they say about doing the same thing over and expecting a different result? That's what the Democrats are ultimately trying to do here.
Is this kind of, I know that the government shutdown almost hinged on this. Do you think that this is going to be something that, once again, there's going to be some sort of, not government shutdown, of course, but some sort of debate that really does lead up until that deadline of the 31st? Or will that vote that they take, what's maybe expected for next week or the week after, maybe be the final straw? Maybe it's a temporary extension. Maybe it's just, trying to do something to get it done. Or is this going to drag on for some time?
I think the funding to keep the government open only goes until, I believe, sometime in January. So I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if we're back here doing this again. Look, again, the Democrats, they sold these temporary subsidies, which means more taxpayer dollars going to insurance companies and, frankly, people who should be able to afford health coverage of their own volition without the government subsidizing them. And they've extended them multiple times with no Republican votes. Now that they don't have the votes, they're like, we created a problem, Republicans, you fix it. Well, the Republican solution is going to involve more direct money to consumers, to American citizens, to lower healthcare costs. And again, that's antithetical to most of the Democrats who want a big government, one size fits all healthcare solution for America, which is what Barack Obama really wanted when he tried to pass Obamacare, but he didn't have the votes to do it.
What's the impact on a state like Nevada? Maybe it's the political landscape of it, of just what happens next. Of course, a purple state, just about every congressional seat, somewhat purple or barely blue leaning, barely right leaning. How does this impact this year?
Well, it requires explanation, which by both sides, by both Democrats and Republicans, which is always difficult. And I think right now voters trust Democrats to handle healthcare more than they trust Republicans to handle healthcare. That's just because Democrats historically have been more vocal about healthcare. And frankly, they passed Obamacare, which wasn't popular at the time and is more popular now, but still is not overtly popular. But for Nevada, I think it's just a question of consumers realize that in many cases, their health insurance costs more than their mortgage. And that's a humongous problem that, frankly, both parties need to address. The question is which side is best able to sell their narrative to the voters and have the voters say, I agree with you, or your way is less harmful to me than the other way. And I think that's where this all is going to play out. And I know both sides are polling like mad right now to try to figure out ways to message this and to see which side actually gains an advantage from either solving or by not solving this and using the issue as a political cudgel against the opposition.
Now, our conversations have expanded past Lee and Klink. We've also spoken with brokers, people that have been affected by these subsidies and their potential expiration. For those stories and more, to our YouTube page, News3LV, and to our website, news3lv.com.